Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Camilo Fernandez. I am the president of the Miami Law International Arbitration Society, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. Uh, the Miami Law International Arbitration Society was founded in 2018, and this is one of our premier events, and it is our first event with our very special institutional supporter and broadcaster, Arbitration Channel, Canal Arbitrage from Brazil. The Miami Law International Arbitration Society is a nonprofit of students dedicated to the promotion of international arbitration. And today we are very proud and very happy to be hosting three very renowned speakers, the names of Ms. Sophie Nappert, Mr. Federico Ast, and Mr. Ignacio Ferrer-Bonsoms. I would like to take a moment to introduce Mr. Federico Ast, who is a graduate in economics and philosophy from the University of Buenos Aires and who holds a PhD in management from IAE Business School. He is the founder and CEO of Kleros, a legal tech company that is using game theory and blockchain technology in arbitration. I will allow Mr. Ast to speak first and to finalize an introduction of himself and Kleros, which he has a better grasp of than I do. Thank you very much. Mr. Ast, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Camilo. Thank you very much for having me. Can you see my slides now? All good? Okay, so let me give you a short introduction, a very short introduction of Kleros, so you get a grasp of this new movement that we call decentralized justice. And to start with, so we have the reality of a new economic era based on global work, people doing like freelance work for customers from all over the world, and also the idea of capital and crowdfunding, and people from different countries and jurisdictions can make, investment in projects coming from all over the world. And this new type of work and new type of investment are mainly in small amounts of money. This is not the traditional arbitration that we were used to see in the context of ICC, for example. So, very simple case of our times. Alice, she's an entrepreneur from France, and she hires Bob, who lives, I don't know, in Venezuela or in Guatemala or in Argentina or in any country, to do some video for her company, a promotional video. So he does the work, and she's not happy because she claims that it was not good enough quality. So of course she's not going to go to court in Guatemala, or she's not going to go to arbitration in the traditional world for a small claim of maybe $1,500. So this is the reality of our time, and the reality of cross-jurisdictional small claims that even sometimes happen between people who don't know who they are because they operate through avatars in the metaverse. So let's imagine, how would this work with Kleros? So Alice makes an agreement with Bob for this job that he's going to do, and she sends a payment under the form of cryptocurrencies into a smart contract that will will work as an escrow for the funds. And they both agree that if there is a dispute in this case, they are going to go to Kleros for resolution. So Kleros is a online arbitrator based on blockchain. So if there is no dispute, all's good. She releases the fund. But in this case, there is a dispute between them, and Kleros is going to be called to arbitrate the case. So Kleros is going to select a number of jurors who are going to consider the evidence. They're going to see the contract between the parties. They're going to see the product that was delivered, and they're going to make a decision, each of them independently. Very important thing, Kleros is built on blockchain, which means that no one can tamper with the evidence, and no one can tamper with the jury selection process. So this means that both parties can trust that the procedure is going to be carried out exactly as it was coded into the smart contracts. So jurors make their decision, and Kleros decides by majority that Alice wins. So the funds that were locked into the smart contract are going to be sent to her, and so she gets the funds back, and this ends the problem, right? So a very important part of Kleros, on which I unfortunately don't have the time to go into now because of, well, lack of time, is that all of the incentive system that makes jurors vote honestly and make the right decision is based on part of the economic science called game theory, which is about how agents interact in situations of uncertainty and in situations where they have to optimize their strategy, taking into account how other agents might behave. And in particular, the work from this gentleman you see on the screen, that's called Thomas Schelling. Schelling was game theorist, very popular in the 1950s, and he is quite famous because of a concept called focal points, that is about how people interact and how people is going to be make decisions under situations of uncertainty, right? So in the case of Kleros, jurors are not drawn in a traditional way. In order to be a juror in Kleros, people have to buy a token, and this token gives them the right to be randomly drawn uh, as juror in the cases that they exist in the platform. I'm not going to go more into detail now, but you can ask me later if you want. But the main idea of the main goal and of having this game theoretical approach to solving disputes is that it's way cheaper and way faster than traditional resolution methods. So traditional methods of dispute resolution are like mini trials on Zoom, where you have a parties, an arbitrator, and a hearing, which is of course more efficient than doing this on a courtroom and traveling, but it's like a 20-30% more efficient. So Kleros, because of the way in which it works, it's 10x more efficient, and cases typically are resolved in like less than 1 week. So what types of use cases does Kleros target? E-commerce disputes between buyers and sellers, situations where you have an insurance company against a policyholder for who should pay for this car crash, utilities dispute between user against company of telecom, credit card, whatever. So this type of consumer small claims, and even Kleros was already successfully used in a civil case in Mexico in a landlord versus tenant dispute that was actually enforced by the ruling was enforced by a traditional court in Guadalajara. And then lots of cases coming from the world of the future, or well, maybe already from the present, like esports. Imagine two teams of an esport tournament having a conflict on someone accuses the other of cheating, and so who are you going to call for this situation like this? 20 people from different countries, some of them anonymous. So you need a metaverse, native method for resolving this claim. And as you can imagine, the metaverse world is going to have a lot of claims that also require a native system like Kleros. Okay, so what we see for the future, and this almost finishing with this, for more objective kind of claims, we imagine AI is going to be used because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more efficient. But there are a number of situations that AI cannot resolve well because of intentionalities in agents or because of context. So this is where Kleros and other decentralized justice systems are going to be more useful. And then there's going to still be more complex situations that have multiple parties or that require some traditional legal reasoning. And so that's where I think that lawyers and traditional arbitration is still going to be, used as more or less as we know it now. So to finalize, centralized justice is made of three main ideas. First, the blockchain for securing the system and making sure that it's transparent. Second, the idea of peers and collective intelligence as the way in which disputes are resolved. And finally, the idea of crypto-economic incentives and game theory and this new incentive system in order to produce systems that are more secure, more efficient, and faster than what exists for a world of new types of disputes in the metaverse. So thank you very much, and well, happy to be here, and we'll answer as many questions as you like later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Ast. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Sophie Nappert, who is an esteemed independent arbitrator who practices and is based in London. She's dual qualified both in the Bar of Quebec and is a solicitor of the Supreme Court of England and Wales. Now, before becoming a full-time arbitrator, she pursued a career as an advocate and was the head of an international arbitration at a global law firm. And so we are really grateful to have Sophie here today. And I will invite you just for a couple of minutes if you'd like to give a little insight as to the angle and perspective that you're bringing to this really exciting conversation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in conversation with Federico and with the players and the new people who are in the Web3 ecosystem. It's quite interesting to me that the arbitration that I practice and the legacy world of arbitration and dispute resolution generally, even for the courts, have a lot of work to do to make themselves relevant to the world of blockchain. One of the things that I've been extremely I really want to put forward is the fact that one of the things that arbitration and dispute resolution hangs on is due process. And due process is procedural fairness. Procedural fairness has meant that we need a lot of time throughout the process to allow the parties to put forward their case, to respond to each other, and that time is something that does not exist in the Web3 environment anymore. It's something that is not valued. Whether that's right or wrong is not something that I'm going to talk about today because that is not relevant. But in the Web3 environment, time has a different value. And so what that means for the legacy dispute resolution system is that you have to adapt to the fact that the new players and users of Web3 trading and commercial interaction are just not willing to wait a year and a half to have a dispute resolved. And so for me, the really interesting challenge is to get arbitration to adapt to what the Web3 environment has to offer, and that means also to its new concept of time. Federico and I have been speaking, I've been in dialogue for a couple of years now, I think, and I have to thank him, I think, publicly for allowing a very straight-laced lawyer to speak to him and to say to him, what are you doing? And in many ways, I don't agree, and I think a lot of the tenets and the premises of Kleros are fine and very intelligent. Some of them need, I think, to be reviewed in light of scaling up to more mainstream disputes. That's not the topic today. The topic is really if you are going to think about the Web3 environment as a place to resolve disputes, then you have to think about Kleros, and you have to think about peer-to-peer justice, and you have to think about decentralization. And what does that mean? What does that mean for those of us who are traditional lawyers, who have been, raised in the law schools that are still existing today? And I think that's what we're going to discuss this evening is this evening for me, today for you, is going to be, how do we need to rethink certain tenets of dispute resolution? And for me, the tenet of due process and how long it takes is very much a topic that I want to discuss, and how we can make justice more efficient in a very shorter time frame. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Definitely, there is a tension between, as you said, due process, and one of the greatest attractions to arbitration is its efficiency. So definitely excited to elaborate on that in a little bit. But before continuing, I'd like to warmly welcome Mr. Ignacio Ferrer-Bonsoms. So grateful that you could be here tonight. A little bit about him is that Mr. Ignacio is a Spanish attorney. He has over 20 years of legal experience. He's a partner, but not just that, he also is the president of the Blockchain Arbitration Society, which we'll be discussing more a little bit later tonight. He received his master's degree in international business law from the Universidad de Barcelona in 2020. And really, we're so excited for you to be here, Ignacio. If you wanted to share a few words again about your angle and perspective tonight, they would be welcome before we jump into questions.
Thank you very much to be here and for sharing this panel with Sophie and Federico. When we started with Blockchain Arbitration Society, I've been asked a lot of times about Kleros and what are the differences between Blockchain Arbitration Society and Kleros, because we are focused on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And so for me, it's a pleasure to meet here Federico, at least now. Okay, our perspective is more, I think we are between Federico and Sophie, because we are like a chamber of commerce, but crypto. So we have an international court. So we share the same problems as Sophie is telling and explained before. So we need some lawyers, but they must be crypto. So they need knowledge about what's a cryptocurrency and everything connected with blockchain. So you have to know a lot of things, and you have to use cryptocurrencies, like what's a wallet, what's MetaMask, or what kind of blockchains there are, what's liquidity mining, and those sort of things. So you need like crypto lawyers that they are using this technology. I think we need like new institutions, and these new institutions must first of all know what this new technology, what's the new proposal. And I think the first proposal is that Bitcoin is law. So we can think that Bitcoin is only a cryptocurrency, but is something more. We are creating law. That is the regulation of a new currency. So nowadays we have like 20,000 new cryptocurrencies. That means that we have 20,000 new laws. So it's a lot. So we have like a parliament that is working a lot. In 13 years, we have like 20,000 new laws. Some of them, they're going to disappear because they are not well built. That's what happened with Terra Luna and UST. So it was not a proper stable coin. So this parliament or virtual parliament is very demanding, and we need this new institution. And I think we are very different from Kleros in the sense that we are trying to create a new community, that we are not using technology to solve this blockchain technology to solve our problems. We are using traditional ways, that is a chamber of commerce, but with special arbitrators. More or less is our approach to this issue.
Great, thank you so much. Definitely would like to hear you elaborate a little bit more on Bitcoin as law, because I think that might be a little bit of a contentious proposition, but an astute observation. And so very excited to hear more. Before we continue, I would like to just invite everyone from the audience, please, as we continue this discussion, ask questions in the chat, and there will be a time period at the end where I'll channel those back into the panel discussion, and we'd love to really address what you're interested in. Although thanks to the Miami Law International Arbitration Society, we've been able to connect with students and young legal practitioners in the arbitration field, particularly around Miami, to come together with some questions for this incredible panel tonight. So please ask your questions in the comments. And by the way, my name is Daria Pietropaulo. I am a law student at the University of Miami, and I am on the Miami Law International Arbitration Society board. So very pleased and honored to be able to moderate this panel. And so with that, I'd like to kick it off. And I would like to start with Mr. Ast, just generally, what type of technology, and that could be a method or a tool, is most greatly affecting the practice of law, specifically international arbitration, and why do you think that? Oh, I believe you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I guess that if you ask me, that the most important technology that is affecting now the practice of law is well, the internet. Basically, lawyers and arbitrators, they had this very installed idea of having to go to physical places to hold the hearings, and so unfortunately we had a pandemic in order for some things starting to change, in the sense of adapting to a way of doing things that is already common for most of other activities. So I think the internet is the most important technology that is currently affecting law for sure. And I think that after this is starting, then we will see for sure coming the new, wave of new technologies that are going to have also an impact, of which, as I mentioned in my presentation, is going to be like AI and crowdsourcing in general. So, but for me, the first step was already done, and yeah, I'm very excited about what's coming in the future.
Thank you. Sophie and Ignacio, do you agree that with the impact of the internet, or more specifically, a particular aspect of the internet that has most greatly impacted your work on a day-to-day basis, especially as we enter this post-COVID era?
Ignacio? Me? Ignacio, please. Ignacio, please.
Yes, as Federico said, thank you, Sophie. Internet is, perhaps for us, is the great change. In my case, I am working with cryptocurrency issues, so we can use blockchain and cryptocurrency as a new technology, but it's connected also with internet. And for me, the great thing is that it's like blockchain is a new jurisdiction that is virtual, and it doesn't mind some other things that perhaps some years before were very important, like image, for instance, or where do you live, or so. For me, that's great, because I can still live in my city that is very small, and it's not one of the greatest city in Spain, but I don't mind. It's perfect now in this new era.
I think what I wanted to say on this is something that is not said very much, which is, of course, the internet is important, and it has become the more important thing in the pandemic, because we were forced to meet online. But there are emerging jurisdictions that do not have bandwidth, that do not have access to the internet. And what do we do about that? There was very little said about that during the pandemic. I have cases, sorry, I have cases with a lot of jurisdictions in Africa and other continents where the access to bandwidth is not, Caribbean is another one, where the access to bandwidth is not guaranteed on a high level. And I wonder it is very important to me that the access to justice remains available on a remote basis, and the access to even conferences like this one, a symposium, an event like this one is available on a remote basis, because a lot more people, otherwise we would have gathered all in one space, but now we can have a lot more people join us remotely, but they need to have bandwidth. And so my question is, it's not an obvious thing. It's not an obvious thing to go forward with this model if you don't solve the problem of emerging jurisdictions access to bandwidth. It may well be that we will have to have a system where you have certain jurisdictions that are able to meet in person, and certain jurisdictions that that will need to meet in person because they cannot have access to bandwidth. I mean, obviously, it's beyond my remit to answer that question, but I just wanted to put that on the table. It is not. We assume in the developed world that access to bandwidth is a given. It's not a given everywhere.
Absolutely. And I think that access to justice goes hand in hand with your due process comment earlier, and ensuring that all parties involved are able to effectively be able to resolve their disputes. So it's definitely a valid concern. Just as a follow-up, Sophie, would you say that the emerging use of blockchain technologies has affected your work in those areas in a more, I don't know, difficult way than in other cases that you had? Would you mind elaborating on that point?
I would say that those jurisdictions that are able to access Kleros, for example, are lucky that they have the bandwidth and the internet access that they can have to access blockchain, because we know that blockchain is a technology that requires a considerable amount of power, that has blockchain has a footprint ecologically that is not great, and so that's a problem. In my practice at the moment, I have a couple of disputes arising out of the blockchain system, but are taken off of chain and towards a more traditional dispute resolution system. But if we're talking seriously about just the on-chain system, then I think the problem remains. Can you access it? Can you actually make sure that you can have your dispute heard if you have sufficient bandwidth to get there? I think for Kleros, I mean, this is not something that either Fede or I have spoken about before, but it might be interesting to explore how they address this sort of thing, because Kleros, I know, and Fede can expand on this, obviously, that is very much, Kleros is very much about access to justice for those disputes that are not, a very high level or high value. And so it may well be that those disputes are also in parts of the world where they are not able to access bandwidth. And so maybe Kleros wants to get there and make that accessible. And I'm just putting that on the table, and maybe Fede has thought about this, I don't know.
I mean, I think that maybe one of the core advantages of Kleros is this ability of reaching everywhere. So I come from an emerging economy. I mean, I'm Argentinian. I lived all my life in Argentina. So, I mean, I can tell you in Argentina, we don't have lots of things. I mean, we don't have a stable currency. We don't have rule of law. we'll have other lots of different things. But we do have crypto, and this gives us access to um, some currency that we can use for making transactions, and we also have, access to these internet jurisdictions, being Kleros or others. So I mean, and think this from the most practical possible perspective. A guy in Argentina living in, Buenos Aires, and then the guy learns how to um, code through the internet, because he saw YouTube videos. And the guy has a smartphone. Most people have a smartphone of basic capabilities, and lots of people have like very simple like laptops, and you can have access to the internet in general. It's not super high speed, but you can use it. You can access most of the same apps that people have in Silicon Valley. And so um, but you didn't have the chance to like export your services of software or writing or whatever to the world, because since the financial system is so weak in Argentina, you just cannot receive money from other countries. It's extremely hard, extremely expensive, and no one would like hire you. If you are a customer in Miami and you need some Alice and Bob type of situation, um, you wouldn't hire a guy from Buenos Aires, because you don't have any chance to. If the guy doesn't do his job, you're not going to go to court or arbitration, right? So I would say that the guy in Buenos Aires, he doesn't have access to the traditional arbitration systems. It's not even an option for him. So Kleros or others, give him the possibility of accessing at least some basic governance structure that will help uh, him to export his services. And the guy who's hired the Argentinian, they will both can trust the same thing, even if they are in different jurisdictions. So for me, this is a very powerful tool for meritocracy. And of course, it's in the early stages. Sophie, you could have mentioned a different argument. You could have said that gas costs in Ethereum are really expensive, and that it costs like maybe some dozens of dollars to even use blockchain, or hundreds sometimes, and that would be true.
Yeah, that would be true. That would be true. You're right. You're right. You're right.
But we need to always keep in mind that the blockchain is in the 90s of the internet. It's slow, it's expensive, and it's all that. But I don't have any doubt that this is going to become better, because that's how technology evolves. It starts to be very expensive, and then goes down in cost, and then it becomes massive. And nobody had a smartphone in Argentina like 15 years ago. Now everyone has a smartphone. So
Fair.
this is going to go in the right direction. So I don't have any doubt that this is not the main problem that we will have to face as a blockchain, as an industry, or Kleros itself.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good point that there may be indeed bandwidth issues, but on the other hand, with internet connection, going back to our first question about the biggest technological change, when you do have that connection, there are different access to justice opportunities like Kleros that become available that wouldn't have otherwise been available to people. And so for that, definitely there's an important technological advantage there. Now, to pivot a little bit in terms of questions, I want to turn to Ignacio and ask, first, generally speaking, should there be a crypto-specific jurisdiction? And could you elaborate a little bit about the Blockchain Arbitration Society as it relates to having a crypto-specific jurisdiction?
Okay, the first of all is I think that in fact there is a jurisdiction that is the crypto jurisdiction, because this is something when someone is criticizing Bitcoin, they are saying you are a lack of regulation. That is a common criticism. What I think is how Bitcoin could be one of the best cryptocurrencies in the world. That is the 14 by market cap without law. it doesn't make any sense. So all this new crypto world is a jurisdiction, and it's a new jurisdiction. It's a new way of creating law. And some time ago, we needed parliaments, governments, countries, and citizens. And now, the only thing we need is community. You need someone to believe in your project. This community is worldwide, so it's something really huge. So that's on a description of Bitcoin is the internet of money, or it's like the best money created in internet. But I think it's more is the law of internet. We can create law. So in that sense, it's a jurisdiction. But we need also, as I said before, new institutions that can like study that new law or how it works. And if you have a controversial, for instance, if you are launching a new cryptocurrency or a token, the white paper is law between parties. So you are committing yourself to do one thing, that's law. So you have to protect that law too. And in some sense, you have to be able to claim for that law because you have rights. Speaking about bandwidth, you can see that I am disappear sometimes. But more or less is that our point of view. So in fact, I think there is a jurisdiction, but we need new institutions to recognize that jurisdiction.
And what would those types of institutions look like that would be able to sufficiently recognize a crypto jurisdiction so that legitimacy and credibility can be built?
For as a blockchain arbitration society, our main objective right now is to have a community, because if you don't have community, you are nothing. And then because we are an association, legal association, we are like a chamber of commerce, so our awards can be be made force anywhere. So it's like other chamber of commerce. This is the Convention of New York 1958. So that's effective. In fact, by the way of fact, is effective. So that's our approach.
Absolutely.
And I
Well,
think Kleros has that too. That's what I heard. I read one on LinkedIn, something about it, but I don't know if I think it's like that too.
well, I'd like to turn to Federico to ask, how does a decentralized justice system differ from the idea of a crypto jurisdiction?
So I think that this is, I think, very new lexicon. So there might be different opinions about this, but I think that a digital jurisdiction is, generally speaking, like a seat for arbitration of all of the claims that are connected to like that jurisdiction. So in the sense that court system was the place to go settle disputes within a territorial nation state or municipality or whatever. So I think the idea of the digital jurisdiction is the same. Whatever happens in this digital world, in this metaverse, if you want, will be settled by this seat or this system. Decentralized justice, in my view, is a specific way to organize the resolution process, which is born from four main ideas. One of them is arbitration, international arbitration, in the sense of solving dispute, mostly business disputes. Second is the idea of ODR, as using the internet to solve disputes. The third one is blockchain for securing the process and making sure that the everything is carried out exactly as was coded, and so all parties can trust in the procedure. And the fourth one is this idea of using game theory and mechanism design to produce a system that is like efficient, fast, and all that. So, a knowledge jurisdiction can have a decentralized justice system for resolution, but also can have others. So I never say, and Sophie will hold me to the truth on this. I never say that Kleros is for everything. I always say that Kleros is for some types of claims that are not well resolved by AI and fully automated methods, but that are not well resolved by traditional legal systems because they are like smaller type of claims. So one jurisdiction can have different resolution methods and probably also a combination of methods to solve claims. And so, in my view, that's the difference. So, decentralized justice is one way in which a jurisdiction can work.
Well, thank you. That was a helpful differentiation. And this leads me, you mentioned the effectiveness of blockchains in terms of security concerns in these proceedings. And I'd like to now turn to Sophie to ask, in your experience as an arbitrator, what concerns exist from a governance perspective about the use of blockchain in arbitration or ADR more generally?
I mean, blockchain governance is a topic of great currency and great scholarship. We don't have a consensus on this. Every blockchain has their own system of governance, be it on-chain governance by the community or something a little bit more centralized by some sort of a committee sitting over the blockchain and deciding. Now, I think if you're going to look at the dispute resolution system within the blockchain, I've been asked before to talk about arbitration on the blockchain as a system of governance. I don't think that arbitration or dispute resolution can be a system of governance on the blockchain. I think the blockchain is very much a system that wants to reach to the peers or the users to have a governance system. At the same time, I think that a successful system of arbitration on the blockchain will need to have a little bit more centralization. And I know that I'm not being popular by saying this, but a little bit more centralization, just because, and Colin Rule agrees with me, Colin Rule, who is the creator of the eBay ODR and PayPal ODR, agrees with me that you need some sort of knowledge that someone will say at one point, this is not allowed. This is not something that we will want to have on this community. And so I think if you're going to have a successful means of dispute resolution on this platform, you may well need more governance than what is available at the moment. I know it's a very difficult time to speak about blockchain governance because we are at a time where there are very many models of it that are being discussed, and every blockchain has their own system. Yet we don't have a consensus, but I think the users will probably want something that's a little bit more governed in order to have their disputes heard and decided, rather than something that is completely decentralized. Would be my way of saying it. In a year's time, I may say something different.
That's very fair. I think it's clear that things are changing quickly, to say the least. Federico and Ignacio, do you have a different perspective on this, or any thoughts you'd like to add in terms of blockchain governance?
I think that we are kind of like in a situation like the Federalists in the United States, Constitution, convention, where at some point, they were like trying to build a governance system for a big, democracy, and there were no like previous experiences about democracy besides, ancient Athens, like 2,000 years before that. So they tried to do the best they could with the knowledge they had. And I think that we are in kind of a similar situation. We are in a world where we are starting to try to build the institutions for governance for the future of the internet, and we are going to be in a world where we are going to face problems that no one had faced before. Like, for example, people trying to subvert voting governance systems by creating fake accounts. That was, I mean, harder to do in person. People, I mean, algorithmic, attacks on systems. We are in a quite scary world, if you want, if you put it that way, of science fiction attacks. And we're trying to see what are the best ways to resolve this. And we have, believe me, we have not even discussed what the most radical ways to govern these new online platforms. Like, one of those is called futarchy, that involves making prediction markets, and and I don't want to say gambling, but kind of, in order to support a governance system. If you are interested in learning more about all the debates that are around blockchain governance, I do recommend this book called Radical Markets, that is by Glenn Wild and Eric Posner, and it's kind of a really interesting review of this new, like, science or discipline combining, political science and economics, and computer science for building this secure decentralized system. So, I mean, I think that if you actually read that book, you will get a much better grasp of where Kleros fits in the development of, online governance.
There's also a great article by Primavera de Filippi on blockchain governance that I can share on the chat as well, which is very lucid and she is a lawyer, so she has that perspective, which is worth looking at, because, I mean, it's great to think about this area as being a free, open space. It would be great to see that it's not what the internet became to be, which is a free, open space as it wanted to be at the beginning, and then became overtaken by the big data companies. It would be great to see something different. I don't know whether that will happen or not, but it's nice to see a lawyer and others looking at this as governance, because governance is key to the space being able to police itself and to survive. So I'm going to put that in the chat, actually.
Absolutely. Thank you for those recommendations. Ignacio, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'm more or less, I share Sophie's point of view that we need some centralized governance because you need rules. And if you think about decentralization in the blockchains, I think the only pure decentralization is Bitcoin. And you can criticize even Bitcoin saying that miners are the owners of Bitcoin. But the rest of blockchains, they are not properly decentralized or pure decentralized. And even the DAOs, because as a lawyer, I'm working with some DAOs, they are more or less controlled by the company who is developing the DAO. And there are some cases, Uniswap, for instance, they were launched a liquidity pool, but Uniswap decided not to go ahead with that pool because it was a fake pool, for instance. So the community said, how do you know that? Or why you decided that? We should decide that because we're the community. So you need governance. In fact, is what's going on right now. You need governance. But when I said that, we need also tools to try to decentralize in some way. Like, for instance, who should be governing or who should decide certain things? Perhaps the community should decide some of these aspects. More or less is my view right now.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful. And Ignacio, I'd like to stay on you as we move into our last question before before opening it up for the audience, which is targeted towards specifically students and those that are either new to lawyering or to this technological sphere of the practice of law, which is how can we as law students or as lawyers learning about this area equip ourselves with the skills and with the knowledge to address the circumstances that this new age of technology brings. You spoke at the very beginning about how it's important that those that are involved, whether it be in something related to the Blockchain Arbitration Society or just NFTs in arbitration or blockchain technologies, that we have attorneys that are really well versed in these areas. What can we do to bridge this gap from a learning and from a student perspective?
Yes, thank you for the question. We have an academy in the Blockchain Arbitration Society because we want to create a legal community. That's something that doesn't exist right now in the world. So we want lawyers to become crypto lawyers. It was more or less part of my experience because I started working with crypto clients, and this kind of crypto clients, they don't believe in laws or they don't believe in states. They are anarchists, so they don't even believe in accountability. So there are some rules you have to follow. That's it. So sometimes you have to explain to them, okay, I am not a judge. I am not the state, but you should follow this rule. Okay, thank you, Ignacio. But by doing that, and I started using all sort of blockchain. So for instance, I started working in one DeFi, that is on Spanish DeFi, that is Bamboo DeFi. And one day I was using it and I was mistaken. So instead of adding liquidity, I swap WBTC with Ether. But it was a very small pool, so I collapsed the pool. I stuck the pool, I collapsed it. So you couldn't add liquidity. So when I spoke to my client and I said, okay, look, I was trying to do this, but the pool is not working, sorry. And he said, you broke my pool. And I said, okay, don't worry, you can create it again. And he said, no, this is blockchain. You cannot do that. Everything is there. Oh, sorry. So, but with these experiences, I started to learn and to think as a crypto. And I think that's the main thing, because I am not properly a lawyer right now. I don't know, I cannot speak about the law, but I know about crypto and I am a lawyer. So more or less, I know the solution to problems. So I want to do this. Okay, perhaps you should go to this jurisdiction or to this other. But if someone, a lawyer, starts speaking to me about law, my head burns. That's something that happens to crypto lawyers. No, to crypto people. You cannot speak about law. That sounds very strange. So more or less, using crypto and having these experiences is very positive, because then you became a crypto. So you are like them, but not like them. You are in the middle, more or less.
Just like filling that same gap that Federico was talking about on the two extremes. Federico, do you have any words of advice on that point?
Check what is in the pool where you are going to put money before you put the money there. I think that the whole crypto ecosystem is built on the idea of individual responsibility and accountability, and so there is a very strong, I'd say anti-paternalistic, vibes, if you want. So it's your money. You need to be careful where you store your private keys, because if you lose them, you lose your money. And try to verify where you are going to, what coin you're going to buy, because if you buy some scam coin because you didn't check or because you wanted to make some, fast money, well, then you can lose everything. So in some way I think it has like the good and the bad things of maybe the Wild West. So maybe well, the bad thing is that it's the Wild West and everything. I mean, there's lots of people out there trying to get your money. The good thing is that also you learn to be responsible in how you do things, and you take some security measures so not to be scammed. And what is happening now, and it's going to happen in the times to come, is what happened to the Wild West. There's going to be like a state, or I don't know if it's going to be states, but maybe, but some governance systems started to try to put order into this, disorder, a collection of individuals, interacting online. Um, so, I mean, I think that's going to be the important thing of how we can create these new entities that are going to put order into this Wild West without us recreating the same mistakes that were done when we created, nation state governance. And so there's going to be governance. So all of the anarchist, dream of non-governance, freedom for all. I mean, it's just that was the romantic early days of the Wild West. But there's going to be governance. My hope is that this governance that we will have on the internet is going to be more based on like private governance principles than on like some, I mean, big governments trying to intervene. But well, we'll see how it goes.
Yes, we will. I assume it's safe to say that we're entering a period of rebirth in that regard. Sophie, do you have any follow-up to either the comments that Federico made or advice for law students who are trying to catch up to speed and best equip themselves to be what is this technologically transitioned 21st century lawyering?
So I find it amazing that this is entering our field, because for the 21st century lawyer, it means that you have to turn every single tenet that I learned in law school on its head. It is completely changing the notion of sovereignty, of even the notion of a state border, because that doesn't exist in the Web3 economy. And what does that mean in terms of what you learn about the law? I will say to what Ignacio and Federico said, I will embrace that new field, but I will say, bring a lawyer's mind who is willing to not start with the premise of boundaries and sovereignty. Start with the premise of fairness and justice in another environment, in an environment that is peer-to-peer, in an environment that values the views of not some centralized entity, but the people that you deal with on a daily basis. What does that mean for a lawyer? Where is your place? How relevant are you in that environment? That to me is very much what I've learned of exploring Kleros with Federico and exploring the metaverse, is that the role of a lawyer is not going to become irrelevant. It's going to become different. And I think the lawyer will be needed in a very different way. And the competitors of arbitrators and dispute resolvers going forward are going to be the peers that decide disputes on Federico's platform. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, does that mean that those peers are going to take the place of lawyers in? Yes, maybe it does. And so where do lawyers find the value? What do they have to add to the equation? This is very much what the future world and the world that many young lawyers are going into. That's what it means for them to rethink. In a way, I will say this very quickly because I know that we are out of time. In a way, the problem is law schools are not teaching you to think in that way. They're teaching you to think in the former way, in a very high at a very high level. But I think you should take that knowledge and take that knowledge in 21st and 22nd century, and to turn these concepts on their head, and to make your space in that very exciting time that Federico and others are heralding.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that observation, and I think it goes exactly back to what Ignacio talked about, which is creating those spaces to build community where you have lawyers that are willing to embrace those differences and sort out what this future looks like. So a big thanks to all of you for fielding those questions, and I'd like to turn at this point to the audience where we have a number of questions, and I'll just I know we're going to be closing in on time, so I'll try to take the next 15 minutes to just go through a couple of audience questions, and I'd like to start with Federico. We have a couple of questions relating to Kleros. One person asked, in regards to Kleros, how can I follow the dispute resolution process and trust that the decision has not been tampered with or swayed?
Okay. Let me just first, before addressing that, just wanted to comment something of the previous question on how can a young lawyer or aspiring lawyer, learn about the future. One great thing to do is like do an internship at a legal tech startup, someone who is working on the type of technology that you find interesting. So some would like machine learning, other would like a contract drafting or whatever. Kleros, we have lots of internship positions. We have a fellowship program that you can use and you can join. So to do some research regarding Kleros. The advice in general is like try to be close to the people who are doing the work that you want to do in the future and that you think where law is going to go in the future. So like an internship at a legal tech startup would be a great way to like give a first step into this new world. That, and the question was again, please.
Well, thank you. That's a great point. The question was, regarding Kleros, how can I follow the dispute resolution process and trust that the decision has not been tampered with or swayed?
So you can basically, if you want to learn how to read smart contracts, then you can just see on the code of Kleros that everything is going to be done exactly as it was meant to be. Like you will see that the file of the evidence of the video that was sent by the video producer or the contract are exactly the same file that the one that was submitted, and you can watch this the code. Then you can also see that the random number generator that decides who is drawn as a juror is going to exactly behave as it expected. So if you don't know how to code, well, you can learn and then you can see this first hand yourself. And otherwise, there's going to be like, auditing companies that are going to, of course, let you know that the process is going to be happening exactly as it's expected. So you have to, trust those companies. Well, yes, but you can always decide to learn yourself, and then you don't have to trust anyone. The important thing is that if Kleros was built like a traditional Web2 company, like let's say we wanted to be like a Google of arbitration, then you wouldn't have the chance to see what's inside, like under the hood, because everything would happen in a proprietary system where like decisions are made. In a black box, and no one who is on the outside can, see what's going on there, right? So there's always going to be room for doubts and suspicion. So, and let me continue with this metaphor. So Web 2 is kind of a black box. Web 3 is like a crystal box, so everyone can see what's going on inside. And so you can see that everything is going to happen exactly as was expected to happen. Yeah, and that's basically predictability is like, say, the key feature of rule of law. So that's what blockchain brings into the digital world.
Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up, we have another question asking about whether someone would be able to manipulate the system by buying a lot of tokens, and then in doing so attack the Kleros court. Have you run into
Yeah,
that situation, or what are you doing to prevent such a thing?
good. That's a good question. So Kleros has an appeal system. So you can like, let's say there is a case with 3 jurors. So you can, more or less easily get 2 of the 3 spots by buying lots of tokens. But there is an appeal system. So if the losing party feels that it was unfair and wants to appeal, there's going to be a new panel of twice as many jurors plus one. So you go from 3 to 7, and then there can be another appeal, 15 and 31. So at each point, it becomes like more and more expensive for the attacker who wants to control the ruling to, start buying more and more tokens in order to, decide how how the decision should be, right? So at some point, I mean, it's very hard, and that the amount at stake should be like really hard, really high, in order for to make sense for an attacker to be willing to spend like millions of dollars in buying lots of tokens, um, making the ruling go in their direction, and then see that since people don't trust Kleros anymore because of this attack, the value of the token go to zero. So you cannot try to attack it, but you would hurt yourself a lot financially when you try to do that. So that's like, there's quite complex. It's a bit more complex than this, but there's some uh, lots of videos of me on the internet, explaining how the game theory works. And yeah, so but this is the main idea, that if you need to have like lots of money to buy more and more and more, jurors, in order to carry out an attack that is successful in the end.
I just
Right.
wanted to say, can I just say very quickly? I mean, from my perspective, this is a very interesting feature of Kleros, that money is at the center of the dispute resolution system, and one has to wonder whether do we have a problem with the fact that justice is being monetized in this way. I just want to put this on the table. I don't have a view either way, but one has to wonder, as a matter of public order, which is the center of the New York Convention and of many principles of law, whether you want to monetize the justice system in the way that Kleros is proposing, which I think is going to be acceptable in the Web3 economy in a very normal way, but in a legacy system, maybe not. So I just want to say that.
Okay, can I answer to the? I have discussed this in the past. So to one extent, I think that what makes many lawyers uncomfortable about Kleros, it's that to some extent it makes explicit something that should not be made explicit, or that people would prefer not to be explicit about money in legal systems, and how well there's a lot of economic incentives that are like moving the wheels of the system. And not take it from me, take it from, Richard Posner, for example, who was a judge in the U.S. District Court, and he writes this very interesting paper called it's from the 90s, called "What Do Justice and Judges Optimize?" The same as everyone else, and it's an analysis of how but it's one of the basic papers of law and economics, and he studies how the incentives works for, judges in the traditional justice systems. And well, it's about how can a judge be punished if he doesn't do his job correctly? And I do recommend that you read this because in the end, what the point he makes is that, well, lawyers and judges, but they are human, and humans are subject to a number of incentives. Some of those incentives are monetary in nature. So no one is saying that Kleros, so the jurors in Kleros only respond to monetary incentives, because that's simply empirically untrue.
It is
Because
true, though.
I mean,
It's
in
true.
some
I mean,
cases,
the whole Schelling point system functions on monetary incentives.
yeah, but the empirical behavior we see in jurors varies a lot, in particular in one aspect. So, and this is something that Colin Rule also observed in his work at the eBay and PayPal. So, depends how much the juror cares about the uh, type of dispute at hand, um, and that affects the effectiveness of the monetary incentives to, model behavior. And let me give you the example that Colin gives, because he researched this way more than us, and because he did it as a way higher scale than us. So this is what he found. So when they started with the crowdsourcing for resolving disputes in eBay, so they had some budget that they could use to pay for users to resolve the claims in the platform. And he didn't have to spend any of that budget, because people would do it for free. Why would they do this work for free? Because they kind of felt that they were resolving the claims of their community. They were resolving the claims happening at eBay, and they all wanted to keep eBay safe for everyone to use it. So then eBay buys PayPal, and they want to implement the same system for resolving disputes with crowdsourcing. And what he finds is that, the budget they had to pay jurors was not enough, because no one wanted to do it for free. Why? Because they had no emotional attachment to the PayPal community, because PayPal is just an app you use to make payments, and you're not part of a community. So
Yeah.
people didn't. So, and this was like an example of how a similar economic incentive can have very different effects depending on a number of other variables. So, uh, that said, economic incentives are extremely powerful incentives to affect people, but they don't work the same in every scenario, as Colin saw at eBay and PayPal. At Kleros, we are way earlier than what he did there, and we are researching where Kleros is a good way to resolve disputes, and where the incentive system based on Schelling points needs to be tweaked, or just replaced by another system for the cases where it just doesn't work. So that's a bit like the thing about money and justice.
Well, that's news to me, and I'm very happy to hear it.
Well, definitely great points have been brought up, and I think all of us in the audience have some serious reading to do after this, as we make up our minds and reconcile with these different arguments. So thank you for that. Ignacio, I'd like to turn to you for one last question asked by an audience member. How do you see certain legal issues such as property rights being affected by NFTs, blockchain, and crypto?
Okay, this is really interesting because, for instance, with proper rights, now I read the news that one house has been sold by an NFT in Florida, I think. So, okay, this is how the idea of Blockchain Arbitration Society came to my head. When, for instance, a client came to my office and someone said, "I'm going to link a token with a property." I said, "Okay, you can do that, but if you go to the public registry, you cannot register that. That's not possible because the register is going to say, okay, you need an official link or something like that." the notary here in Spain is a notary. So the notary is not going to do that. So how do you solve that? How can you get through that public system? Because a blockchain is a public system, is a notary, is a notary without a notary. So the idea is you have to think, and this is interesting because you are like creating law. Now this technology allows us to create law. So for instance, we can do that if you, instead of selling the property, you are selling the shares of a corporation, then you don't have any problem of registering that token in the register. That is very simple. That's the truth. But you need arbitration. Why? Because if the community says that token is the property, okay, it's the shares of a corporations, but you can use, for instance, the floor or the house number 1A. So it's linked the share and the use of a house. So if you go to arbitration, that's law. So that's the way we solve those problems. Those problems you can be solved with arbitration. If not, you cannot create that law. So for me, that's really important because if not, it's impossible. Because this new technology is creating a new law that happened some time ago in the Middle Ages with commercial law. Because in Europe, we were using ecclesiastic law and Roman law. So imagine you are doing business with ecclesiastic law and Roman law. That was not possible. So the new law was private law, and the private law was made by the people working there, the people who were selling things to a new countries. So it was a new private law. Now we are experiencing this is a new private law. So with that idea, I thought, okay, we need an arbitration, court arbitration. If not, I cannot allow anyone that the property, you are the owner of the property. And there are a lot of initial coin offerings in 2018 and to the 2020. And if you read the white paper, you are not the owner of the house. The house belongs to someone who is managing it. You gain the benefits, the profits. So you more or less, I think, is the way I see this topic.
Well, thank you very much. Federico and Sophie, do you have any perspectives to add on that question regarding property rights?
No. I'm not a property lawyer at all, and I completely subscribe to what Ignacio said. I will say that this is very much the area of law that will be coming forward. What we see on the metaverse about property and ownership, and is very much was going to be at the forefront. The disputes and the legal questions are going to arise in this area. Unfortunately, I'm not a property lawyer, so I cannot say much about it.
I'm not even a lawyer, so I cannot add anything to that.
Well, in that case, before wrapping up, do any of you panelists have any last comments, questions, points of advice, or topics for the audience members to think about before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say, I think the thing for lawyers to think going forwards, or for anyone really who's interested in this space, is to not be afraid to turn on their heads the ideas that we have been brought up to think were important in that space. So due process, the time that it takes to decide disputes. we need to rethink the notion of time, because in the Web3 economy, time has no value. In the Web3 economy, countries don't exist. In the Web3 economy, borders don't exist. Governing law has no meaning. The New York Convention has no meaning. I think for lawyers, and I think this is really an exciting time to be a young lawyer, is to rethink the fact that all of this that has worked so well for, like, I don't know, 50 years in the past can be reinvented, and that you can be the agents of that reinvention. That would be my thought. Thank you.
For me, I think that just leave you with one thing that sometimes Elon Musk says, that I mean, in the times of transition, of transformation, like it's good to go back to the first principles thinking. So what were lawyers in the first place created to do? What was the point of lawyers existing? um, I don't imagine it was just to, I mean, create complicated terms that people would not understand. It was to help people, right? Well, solve their claims and disputes in efficient and fair way, right? I mean, I imagine that was what the society as a whole needed to lawyers to be. I imagine that going forward, as we are creating this new crypto governance or whatever you want to call it, so there's going to be lawyers. I mean, but they are going to, I imagine, be more focused on maybe the human elements of how to help humans, solve their problems, instead of like the letter of the law, or complicated like Latin terms. That's how I imagine this to evolve.
Yeah, from my point of view, I would like to encourage everyone to lawyers to start studying this new cryptocurrency world. My experience is really good because I've been claiming banks for 15 years, 10 years, going to court. It was really tough, if I tell you the truth. And now this new crypto world is amazing. I have a lot of experiences with different kind of people. You have this possibility of creating new law, and also I think what's important is to know, that's the value as a lawyer you have, is to know more about crypto. For instance, if someone asks you about a utility token, you have to know about it. How I can do this? That's a security token. Have you thought about it? Oh no. What's the difference between security token or utility token? That's really important. And if you know more or less about cryptocurrency, governance, for instance, a governance token is a utility token. That's a key point. So you want a utility token, prepare a governance token. That's what is going on with, for instance, socios.com and all the funds tokens. They launch an utility token, but it's an utility token, but in general, it's like more a security token, I think. But if you read the law, it's a utility token. So you more or less you have to know how to do these sort of things. But if you want to know that, you have to work with crypto people or to learn these issues. And I encourage everyone to study these things because you are going to have fun, and it's very, for me, it's very funny. So it's great.
It's an exciting area of the law, for sure, and ever changing and so quickly. So this was a great, first step, at least for the Miami Law International Arbitration Society, to be able to have all of you here and to engage in this discussion, where, in the Web3 economy that we're in today, we have to go back, as you said, to our roots in terms of fairness, looking at efficiency, due process, access to justice, governance, and also what adaptations look like, because as these technologies continue to evolve and develop, and we continue to redefine notions of what is the law, what is dispute resolution, what is the practice of dispute resolution, we're also going to have to continue to adapt as lawyers and be ever educating ourselves. So this was a really wonderful opportunity. For me, I feel honored to be able to moderate, and for the Miami Law International Arbitration Society and the Arbitration Channel at Canal Arbitrage, thank you very much. Before we sign off, I'd like to turn it over to Luis Rodrigo, one of our board members, who will close us out.
Thank you, Daria. So I just would like to finish this discussion by wishing everyone a good afternoon, a good morning, and a good night for those who are joining us around the world. I, Luis Rodrigo Castillo, as the Vice President of the Miami Law International Arbitration Society, would like to thank you all and to join us in the first international arbitration discussion regarding the technological transition in alternative dispute resolution. And on behalf of the Miami Law International Arbitration, I would thank our institutional supporters, specifically the University of Miami School of Law and the International Arbitration LM program. Also, thank you, Daria, which is our board member and our moderator. Additionally, thank you to our broadcaster, Canal Arbitrage, otherwise known as Arbitration Channel. And lastly, I would give a special thanks to our panelists in this discussion, Ms. Sophie, Dr. Federico, and Mr. Ignacio Ferrer. We thank you all for sharing your insight, experience, and most importantly, we hope to hear from you guys soon, and of course, to join us in the near future. Thank you guys once again so much for joining us, and I wish you all a wonderful day.